Thank you for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Auto Guide Show. Today we will break down our Super 11 SUV comparison. We have a couple Hyundai reviews and then later we talk to Hyundai themselves, and Aston Martin has something great for us that love cars. But first, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, so we will get started here with the biggest story, obviously, of the week, probably the month, maybe even the year so far for us. We gathered 11 of these SUVs that are hard to classify. They're not subcompacts, but they're not quite what people consider compacts. So I call them small compacts, you know, the Crosstreks of the world.
The Crosstreks, except if people who are viewing the video might notice, it's not actually in this picture because, well, we don't want to spoil it. You should go watch the video.
Yeah, go to our AutoGuide YouTube channel and you'll see a 26-minute video of Kyle and I breaking down what cars were the best. We rank them all in order and tell you the pros and cons. I guess we'll spoil it a bit on the podcast. So
yeah,
if you don't want to know the winner before we talk about it, go watch now. Otherwise, here we go. So we'll kind of just quickly go through. So coming in 11th was the Outlander. And in the video, as I say, it's not a bad little SUV. It's just dated. It's just been around the longest. And 6 years doesn't sound that long, but when every other vehicle there is either all new or heavily updated, it's old. And some of the technology even 6 years ago wasn't the most groundbreaking, I guess, like the infotainment. So it kind of adds up. Now, one thing that may make people buy it without even considering the rest is its warranty. Mitsubishi has such an amazing warranty. But yeah, it's just a little outclassed.
Yeah, and I mean, I trust its all-wheel drive system is right up there with Subaru. I mean, the two rally legends, right? So I trust that if I'm actually going to be heading off-road more than most of these things here. But yeah, I think we've seen how great the new Outlander is because it borrows so heavily from the partnership with Nissan. And so whenever a next Eclipse Cross shows up, I'm sure it'll be really impressive. But right now, yeah, it's the oldest one here by a long shot. The Mazda is next, and I think that's 4 years old.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll get to that one. So
yeah,
not to go on and on with each vehicle, I'll just kind of cover 3 of the next 4, and then I'll let you get into the one that's in the middle. So coming 10th was the Buick Encore GX. 8th was a Chevy Trax, and 7th was the Chevrolet Trailblazer. So you might be wondering, like, that's a lot of GM. Well, it was, but it's because the manufacturer understands and sees the significance of this market, and it's growing. So the reason those vehicles finish in those places, I'll start with the Buick. It's a more premium offering, as Buick is. It's kind of a little out of place in the comparison if you just look at the name, but pricing, features, and capability puts it right in there. And it is one of the more premium feeling, but it's also one of the more premium priced. It's easily the most comfortable to drive, but it wasn't the most premium and it wasn't sort of the most special feeling, yet for its price it should have been. And that kind of left it down where it was. I mean, for those that just want something with a nicer badge and more comfortable, it's worth a look. But the Trailblazer that came a couple places ahead is mechanically very similar. And although it gives up a little comfort, it handles a little better. For some reason, the drivetrain feels more responsive, even though it's the same. Pretty much every one of us that reviewed it preferred driving it. It's one of those vehicles that is so close to being bang on. There's just a couple little things with the Trailblazer. The just a small pet peeve is the steering wheel doesn't pull out far enough. So people that like to have the wheel closer to them, like me, can never get it close enough. The cup holders are too small. The rear seats have a giant C pillar. So although there's lots of space for a passenger, their head's just looking at a black pillar. It does have a panoramic sunroof. It's got pretty good styling. The little 3-cylinder is very torquey for its size. It's got a good 9-speed auto. Like, there's a lot going for it. And as I say in the video, 2-3 tweaks away from probably being right up there at the top 3. And then the other GM, I'll let you handle, as well as the vehicle that finished below it, the Trax.
Yeah. So I really enjoy the Trax, and we've talked about this a lot on previous episodes. I mean, it's because it's related to the Invista from Buick, which is also really nice. And the Trax was a fun one to have in here because it's the only front drive option, and it's far cheaper than everything else. So it was the idea of, well, do you really need to spend all that money? And I know going into this, I was wondering what the point was in the Trailblazer, because I really think the Trax does more or less what everyone needs, unless you genuinely need all-wheel drive. But as it turns out, yeah, there is a lot of difference, right? You're paying a lot more for a nicer cabin and more features. But the Trax impressed all of us because it drives like a car, because it basically is a car. And so it had one of the higher scores for handling. And yeah, we came away impressed with it, but it's never really going to challenge the front runners in this class because it is so much more affordable. So you lose out on a lot of perks. And then, of course, the one that finished in between all these GMs is the Honda HR-V, which I think it's okay for us to say it was kind of the more disappointing vehicle in this whole test, because it doesn't do pretty much anything well. It has a lot of space, and it rides really well because Hondas tend to ride really, really well. But it's expensive. It's slow. It's let's say its looks are an acquired taste. I expected more from Honda. It feels like they kind of dropped the ball in this class.
Yeah, for the Civic and the Pilot being like front runners in their segments, and the CR-V being pretty much up there now too, it's just strange that this was where it was. And I think part of it is it and the CR-V aren't that far apart in terms of size, because if it had the CR-V's engine, I think that would go a long way to improving a lot of our issues. Back to the Trax quickly. You're right, it was never going to win this, but the reason we brought it was to show sort of how this vehicle, it's $10,000 cheaper than a lot of the competitors here, which is almost like a third of the price, competes, and it's in there, it's competitive. I've had 3 people ask me, like we always get asked, like, what's the best car, what's the cheapest car, what should I buy? And all the people who've asked me are all people who are just looking for a basic, pretty spacious commuter. And every single one I've said, go look at the Trax. Like, you're not going to beat its value for price. You get an SUV feel, but you're in a car. Like, it's good for what it is. Anyway, moving on. Next was
into the thick of things.
Yeah. Next was 6th place, which was the, I don't remember, like, it was the Kona, right?
It was the Kona. Yeah. Surprising finish for a newer vehicle and for a Hyundai, which tend to do really well for us in our mega comparisons. The Palisade won the 3-row last year. The Tucson was 2nd for our small SUVs 2 years ago. Hyundai has a pretty good track record, and there's a lot of good things about the Kona. I mean, it's still pretty small. Like, it's grown a lot, but it's still a pretty tidy package. So you get a lot of interior space, but it's still nice and small. It fits easily into parallel parking spots. The powertrain is good on paper because it's powerful. I really don't like the automatic transmission because I find that it is really sluggish to downshift when you need it to. Around town, it's fine, but it's on highway passing maneuvers where you're like, is this going to shift down anytime soon? I personally like the interior. Quality isn't the best in terms of materials, but Hyundai has done a really good job of styling it in a way that minimizes that. And we all had something to say for the column-mounted shifter, which is borrowed from the EVs. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but the trade-off there is you get a huge center console that's really practical and easy to use.
Yeah, I think what really hurt it is a combo of its corporate cousin that we'll get to later. Almost in every category it scored a little lower. And it was the N-Line, which had the sporty look to it, but it didn't really have the drive to back it up for the small compromises in space and whatnot. And speaking of,
I was just going to say, speaking of sporty.
Speaking of sporty, the next was in 5th place was the CX-30. And as I say in the video, don't think of it as really 5th place, because there was a fraction of a point on a 200-point scale, separating it all the way up to third. So the next 3 cars pretty much tied for third. They're just slightly separated. So the CX-30 is exactly what you'd expect. It handled the best. It has the nicest interior, arguably the nicest exterior. It just feels like a premium little SUV. What holds it back is its great handling means it has the stiffest suspension and the roughest ride. And I've never really thought the CX-30 rode all that rough, but when you put it against all its competitors, you really see how choppy it is over broken pavement and whatnot. And this was the non-turbo, which is class competitive in price and fuel economy. But for some reason, the 2.5 and the 6-speed are at odds with each other. It's always changing gears and hunting around. I thought it was the better drivetrain for the vehicle, but maybe the turbo is better for the extra money. And then there's the other drawback is it's just small. The back seat's small, the cargo's small. It's the choice for sort of a single person or a couple that don't really ever need the rear except for to haul stuff, that want something that's somewhat entertaining to drive. Yeah, but I mean, in that case, maybe look at a Mazda 3. It has all-wheel drive. It's more fun to drive.
That's the challenge, right? As Mazda makes a good lineup, that there's a lot of carryover between those two models. For my wife and I and our small dog, yeah, the CX-30 would be a top choice. And then we move on to the other quasi third place, the fourth place finisher, which I think surprised all of us. It was the VW Taos. Came out of nowhere because I
just like a caveat. It didn't surprise me. I knew it was going to finish high because we almost bought one. But go on.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, like I haven't driven one since the launch, and I forgot how good it is. And I remember at the launch, VW telling us like, look, yeah, it's technically a subcompact because it fits under our compact, but really we're offering 2 compact SUVs. And now it makes sense because putting it in this entire group, it's the one that I would happily spend a long trip in the back. Best back seat in this entire segment. And it drives really nicely. It looks good. It's that VW balance of like slightly premium, but you don't feel like you're being shouty about it. The only problem is that it has a dual clutch transmission, which is really jerky in stop and go traffic.
Yeah, the only thing that stopped us from buying one when we bought our car, which is ironically the next one to finish in this list, was my wife just couldn't live with the dual clutch. And I mean, I could live with it, but I feel the jerkiness. And I think in this comparison, all of our testers, all 4 of us, would probably agree if it didn't have the dual clutch, it might have won the whole thing. That was really what was holding it back, because it's not just the transmission score brought it down, but it kind of ruins some of the other aspects of the vehicle.
It's true.
It was only off by a couple points, but if Volkswagen puts an 8-speed into that in a refresher of the next generation, it's going to be quite the vehicle. Mm-hmm. So yeah, moving on to third place, it was the Subaru Crosstrek. It isn't the originator of the segment. People have been making vehicles this size forever, but it was the first vehicle, I would say, in sort of the recent history. So 2012, 2013, that came out that was really just a compact car, lifted up with cladding, but offered the right package people were looking for. They missed the vehicles that were the size of the 90s Forester and the 90s CRV, because they'd all grown and gotten big, and people still wanted something that size. A lot of manufacturers at the time were making actual subcompacts like the CX-3 and the original HRV and the original Trax, which were too small. And there was quite a gap to go up. So yeah, in its 3rd generation already, we had the Wilderness, which is a little ridiculous, but in the right way, because it's all shouty and off-roady, but that's what it is. It's got ridiculous ground clearance compared to everything else here.
It's true.
It has all-terrain tires, yet it didn't drive all that badly. It actually still was one of the better handlers of the group, despite all those facts. And because it has squishy tires and a ton of suspension travel, it's really comfortable on the road. It just swallows up bumps. The packaging's still fantastic. It's got a good rear seat, good cargo, easy to use, great sight lines. The drivetrain, I mean, the 2.5 it's okay. It's loud, but it's powerful. The CVT is the best of the bunch, which I mean is, kind of a backhanded compliment, but
fair.
Yeah, the reason it doesn't win is the interiors. It's way better than Subaru's used to be, but it still can't compete with the best here. Some hated the infotainment. I didn't mind it, but I have a lot of history with it, so that might be the reason. I mean, like I said, we own one. Yeah, it's it's a couple of little points away, but at the same time, you don't really want your Subaru to have like a Volkswagen or Mazda interior. You'd feel kind of bad, ripping it down a trail or covering it with muddy boots and stuff.
That's true. Yeah, as a whole package, like figuring out where it fits in people's lives, yeah, the Crosstrek does its job very well. Not quite enough to beat our second place car, but I think that one isn't quite as well rounded. It got a lot of points for its incredible fuel economy. It was the Toyota Corolla Cross. It's, in my mind, like that's the one that I would buy. I'll just get that out of the way now. Like, the interior isn't great, just like the Subaru. The rear seats are weirdly not good. Because I know we've said that before in the Corolla hatchback, and it's like Toyota took that lesson for their SUV of making it a really tight package, but it's so good on gas. It's actually pretty decent to drive. I know some of the other judges didn't necessarily feel that way. I like it. Yeah, and it's a pretty affordable package, but the amount of money that you save on gas alone is what I think really ramped this one up. But not enough to beat our winner.
Yeah, and it's not a penalty hybrid like we had back in the day. It's one of the most I think it was the most powerful vehicle there.
Yes.
And in the city, it has so much power compared to everything else because it's just got all that electric torque. I mean, on the highway, it kind of starts to even out. But yeah, so on to our winner, because we're running on here, is the Kia Seltos. And it was a vehicle that was not the best in any category. It didn't excel in one thing, but it did everything probably within the top 3 or 4. And it's just one of those jack of all trades. It has the second best rear seat, the second best cargo. It's airy. It drives nice. It has a peppy engine. The transmission maybe is one of the weaker points. The interior is nice. It's got good features. It's affordable. It's one of the lower priced vehicles here. The only sort of down point is maybe the chassis. It's not overly comfortable, nor is it overly sporty, but that isn't probably a huge factor in this segment because people are looking for space and value and features for the money, and it gives you that.
It's true. It's the only one that has ventilated seats at the front. Although I will say, I don't think I ever mentioned it in the video. Well, you talked about it mostly in the video, but I hate the seating position. For whatever reason, I can't get along with it. It feels like you're on a stool and you're looking down at everything, like even compared to the related Kona. But yeah, like you said, everything else is just like always right in the top 3.
No, I fully get what you're saying. I say in the video, you're in a very tall sitting position because I'm fairly tall. And yeah, I feel like looking down. I mean, for shorter drivers is probably great, but
it's true.
But these are like minor little things for the overall package. I think the point of our comparison wasn't trying to find the coolest car we'd buy or the best car for like a driver. It's what's the best vehicle for the most people. And that's the Seltos. And then, the Corolla Cross because of just the hybrid fact in the engine and down. I mean, as you said, when we at the end of the video said, what would you buy? You were Corolla Cross and I was Crosstrek or Taos, just like my last purchasing decision for the family.
Yeah.
Because everyone has personal preference.
True.
So
and they all finished so closely. Like we talked about the three in third place or very nearly, and then the Corolla Cross and Seltos were separated by like 0.2. Like it was a very close feature, and that's what's always great about doing these things is having them all together to be able to make these comparisons back to back.
Yeah, like everyone can rationalize buying any of the 11 vehicles. In the top 5, I mean, it's all like a different group of testers would probably have them in a different order.
Yeah.
Anyway, we need to get on. So we're going to get an update from Project Genesis. This week it's intake, start to make some noise and allegedly more power. And then we'll come back and talk some reviews and news before talking to Hyundai. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With the parts you need at the prices you want and with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, they're guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. So last week, which is really this week, when I was installing these headlights, my air intake showed up. So rather than wait another week to put it in, I figured I'd do it all at once. So here's a little pre-install that I did last week, which is really this week, that I'm showing next week, which is what you're watching now or listening. Don't worry. If you want to see the install again, go to our YouTube channel. Otherwise, I'll describe what's happening. So I've already gotten the old airbox and tubing out. The inlet intake pipe that goes on the turbo was a real pain to get off. And yeah, it looks like there's a little oil there, but not to be concerned about right now. That's a project for a future day. Everything for the kit comes in one big package. You can see if you're watching the video that there's a lot of pieces and it's a little intimidating at first, but the instructions are really well laid out and they even have visual pictures for each step so you can compare what you've done to what they've done. Those wondering about what intake I got, it is this one. It's called the Typhoon. Okay, everything's installed, and rather than show you the actual install, I'm just going to go over sort of what we got here. So this is the main sort of box that separates the intake from the rest of the hot engine. You can see it bolts in by 2 stock places that the old airbox did. This intake that comes with the car just sucks air from underneath the hood and sends it right down here. And this has a hole to get the air in. And then you put this rubber strip around this to sort of seal it up so that cold air is all this is sucking in. Then this oversized filter is attached to a plastic piece that goes through here. You clamp it down here, and then on this side there's a rubber coupling you clamp it to. And the other half of the coupling you clamp to the actual intake hose, and you can see it's got the 2 ports for vacuum and for breathing. KNN actually gives you 2 new pipes, and they're way longer than you need, so you can cut them down to size for however you want to wire it, either under like I did or over. Then further down, it's kind of hard to see, but this then gets clamped to a rubber elbow that clamps right onto the turbo, and it should be much easier to get off if I ever want to take it off compared to the stock one. So it installs easily and cleanly, and I think it's time to see how it works. All right, it's time for a test drive. Let's see what this sounds like and performs like. Do you hear that? Definitely hear the turbo a whole lot more than I could before. That's hilarious. All right, well, I guess it's a success. I wanted a little more sound, and I guess you get fractional more performance, and I think I've got both. I mean, I can't tell the performance, but definitely some sound there. All right, I guess this would be considered a success. All right, so we're back. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun making some turbo whooshes. The next couple weeks we get into some of the bigger stuff: wheels, tires, exhaust, suspension. So looking forward to that. Moving on to other things we've driven recently. Kyle, you spent a week in the new Hyundai Elantra SEL after the refresh.
Yes, which is known as the Preferred in Canada. It's the mid-level trim, which is an interesting theme we're going to go with this week. But yeah, I don't know. We called the Elantra our car of the year a few years back when this generation launched, and I wanted to see what it's like a few years later with this refresh, because mechanically it's the same. There's just a new look, and there's a little more tech and standard kit. So this sounds like a backhanded compliment. We were talking about that with the CVTs before, but this feels like a car sort of tailor-made for Uber and Lyft. It's really good. It's very spacious. It's really easy to drive. It's pretty solid on fuel economy. It's not quite the best in class, but it's not far off. And it's very approachable and friendly, but it's not very exciting. It feels like a very rational decision. And I say exciting meaning, like, I don't expect a sports car. There aren't sports cars in this class. That's not where you're buying this sort of car. But the Mazda 3 can be entertaining, and you can feel proud of having that nice interior. The Honda Civic that you drove pretty recently, really nice all-round experience, and kind of makes you question why you'd go to a bigger model. The Elantra, I mean, I guess I could ask why you'd go to the bigger model too, because this does have a lot of space. But there's nothing that I feel like, there's nothing to be super proud of. And admittedly, this is not a top trim. It's a very good practical A to B car. And I think that's good. And I think the market needs it. But if you're looking for something that is a little more covetable and premium feeling, it's probably not the choice.
Do they still make the N-Line for the Elantra?
They do, but it is, as it's been for a few years now, it is DCT only. So if you want a manual Elantra, you have to go to an N. In Canada, there was a base model manual for a couple years at the beginning of this generation, but yeah, now it's N only, which I'm looking forward to driving because that one has had some mechanical upgrades, including some tweaks to the suspension. So hopefully we get to drive that later in the summer.
Yeah, well, I don't mean for the manual, but the N line at least gives you the more power. Maybe it's a little more fun to drive. Obviously, the N's crazy, so I can't fault Hyundai for going sort of the Corolla safe approach with this version, because you do have sort of the turbo-y, somewhat entertaining vehicle, and then you got the hardcore. But you're right, even like the entry Civic with the 2-liter is still kind of fun to drive. And I haven't driven a 2-liter. Well, there are no more Mazda 3 2-liters. They're done. But the 2.5 is still a pretty good car.
I didn't realize that.
In the USA. Yeah, it starts with 2.5.
Oh, smart.
So
Speaking
moving
of slightly bigger sedans.
I have to look that Mazda up now. Maybe I'm wrong. Moving on, I also drove a refresh 2024 Hyundai. I drove the Sonata, and this too is the preferred in Canada, which is the entry level, and it's the SEL in the US, which is the entry level, but there's no direct connection between the two because the SEL in the US can be front or all-wheel drive, which is new this year, having the all-wheel drive on the Sonata, and in Canada, same with preferred. But the preferred comes pretty much as loaded as that trim gets with either engine or either drivetrain. But in the US, at least what I could find on their builder, is there's a convenience group which adds a lot of the tech that's in my tester, but that it's only added to the front wheel drive. You can't get it with the all wheel. If you want the all wheel, you can't put on the convenience package. And I don't know if that's, I'm sure there's some marketing behind it as to what consumers want with all or not, but this has the 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine, so 191 horsepower. So it's right there with the Ultima all-wheel drive, the Legacy all-wheel drive, all the the 2.5-ish powertrains, and like you said, it's not like overly exciting, but I forgot how nice mid-sized cars are to drive. They just feel so refined, and the suspension nice, and just everything's solid, and the sound dead, and because it's not this big SUV box on wheels. And this really does a nice job of someone who just wants a family car but isn't into an SUV or need the SUV extra little practicality. It does a job. And even if you live somewhere like we do that gets snow, you have the all-wheel drive. It's just a nice all-around, well put together package. If you go up to the N line, you get the crazy turbo engine, like 270 horsepower or 290. It's way up there, but it's only front-wheel drive, which is a little unfortunate. You don't get the all-wheel drive because then you have like a sports sedan. And then they have the hybrid in the US as well, but that's been dropped in Canada. And that's another step up the rung. So it's kind of nice that Hyundai sort of like, here's our naturally aspirated, front and all, then you have our sporty version, then our hybrid. And they're not doing 1,000 trims for the different drivetrains like some manufacturers out there do. Yeah. And it's pretty well equipped. Like I have a panoramic sunroof. I had power seat, heated seat, all the safety stuff you could think of. This has the nice upgraded wheels, and it's got a new look. Good. Yeah, which Hyundai's never been afraid of giving their cars a dramatic restyle. And I like what they did with this. I like it better than probably the last two. Like the last two were very bold and distinct, but they didn't really do it for me. This one does. I really like what they've done, especially the back end design. It's got this cool tail light. There's sort of like almost like an inverted pyramid of 6 little square rectangle lights. So yeah.
I've seen a few on the road, and it really looks great. Good to hear that it's also just comfy.
So moving on, Aston Martin dropped a little bit of news this week that they are making a new V12. The V12 isn't dead, which is awesome. Everyone keeps introducing smaller engines and hybrid this and electric that, which I like. They're all really good, but it's great to see a manufacturer being like, hey, here's an 800 plus horsepower V12 that we've just created.
I think it's really funny because last year they did the whole like, oh, here's the last of line, here's a V12 special edition. And people bought that being like, yeah, I got a collector item. And now Aston does this. And I mean, this was a little too late for us to include in the slideshow, but it dropped late last night where this wasn't even the only V12 announcement this week. Ferrari showed its new, what is it? I can't remember the Italian for 12. Dodinci. Anyway, it's 12 cylinder in Italian. That's the name of the car. And yeah, it's another 800 horsepower V12. So yay Aston, yay Ferrari for keeping the fun alive.
And they're not, like getting that power by hybrid boost and whatnot. It's like, this is just a fuel burn, forget the environment. Let's go. I said the last edition of the Aston can say like, it was the last of that V12.
It's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, good for them. Another just fun news piece was the best color Jeep makes by far is going to be available on the Gladiator this year. So the pinkish Wrangler can now be the pinkish Gladiator. I want to drive one so bad. I reached out to see if it was going to be on fleet this year. Unfortunately, the timing doesn't work. So sad, Mike. But yeah, I just love Stellantis in general for the lack of worry about their car choice or color choices. They always have such fun colors on all their vehicles. I mean, maybe not the Pacifica, but Alfa, Dodge, Jeep, they're just like, hey, you want this shade? Let's go for it.
Yeah, good for them. I think the only company that even comes close is BMW, and even then it's only on like the M cars where you get the really fun colors.
Yeah, the only one I can think of that actually does come close is Lamborghini. And to be in the same category as the Lamborghini with your Wrangler or your Charger is not too bad.
Yeah.
And our final news piece of the week, I'm going to have to rely on your expertise more, Kyle, because, EVs better. But Polestar introduced a prototype EV that charges at ridiculous kilowatt speeds. And they say it can go from 10 to 80% in just 5 minutes, which is approaching that magical 200 miles of range in 5 minutes, sort of artificial bar that people are trying to hit to sort of prove like it could be as good as a gas car, I guess.
Which is, I vacillate back and forth on like, I think we focus too much on charging speeds and range in EVs. I know there are edge cases, like when people are doing long distance trips, you kind of need that sort of information. But for most people, most of the time, it doesn't really matter. But nonetheless, this is one barrier getting knocked down, right? So one less thing for people to be like, I'm not sure. I've charged a Ioniq 5 from almost this amount from 10 to 80% in less than 20 minutes. And if you're stopping for a gas station stop or the equivalent, and you go use the washroom, you go get a snack or a coffee, you're not that far off anyway. But yeah, this is incredible. And if it doesn't have super negative impact on the lifespan of the battery,
yeah, that's my big worry too. Then frying your battery.
Then great. I mean, just give me more of that Polestar 5. Polestar, that's what I want to see is the 5. This is good news.
It's your point. Yeah, I talked to any company that sells high quantity of EVs, and they all have done their own research with their consumers, and they're all 80, 90+% have a home charger that buy an EV. So to them, the public network's almost maybe a secondary concern, if even that. But like you said, this is for people who probably aren't going to use this public infrastructure all that much, but they still worry about it, or they still think I want to do road trips. It's just that a peace of mind thing, and just showing how far the technology comes, because one day, this may translate to your home charger. We'll do it quicker too. But
I mean, without getting too far into the weeds, the other big thing, I was at an EV expo this week, and one of the big talks is what do you do with people who live in condos or multi-unit places, right? And like, this isn't necessarily a solution, but it helps, because if you can't charge at home, at least you can charge very quickly elsewhere and like be done with it and get on with your day. So yeah,
a lot of condos that were built, prior to the last 10 years, which is a lot. They didn't have this built in, so they're looking to do it. But of course, they're going to pass the costs on to their tenants or charge them to use them. So yes, I agree. This is a good solution for the rest who just can't charge at home.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that's it for our news and features. We are going to take a break and get a word from our sponsor. And when we come back, we are going to talk to Hyundai about, surprise, surprise, the Elantra and the Sonata. So this is the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors, and we'll be back soon. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Okay, everyone, let's take a minute and talk about the one that got away. The vehicle you once owned and for whatever reason had to get rid of, and to this day fully regret ever doing so. For me, it's my Subaru SVX. It was a 1997 model, which was one of the last years it was ever sold here. It was black on the outside and it had the beige leather and suede interior. It was in amazing condition for its age because it was just a one-owner vehicle. The interior was near flawless. The paint was pretty good considering it was about a 20-year-old car when I got it. I just loved everything about it. I loved the quirkiness because I love oddball cars. I love the window within the window, the power button on the gear shifter, the way the dash was laid out and you could hide the radio behind the fake wood panel. The flat six was just so smooth and it was all-wheel drive, and although it wasn't overly quick, it still had enough power. The problem was, within a year of buying that car, I ended up selling it because I got a great deal on another vehicle, and to this day I regret doing so. Part of the reason I sold it was, although it was in great shape, it wasn't perfect and there were things that needed to be fixed, like the air conditioner, reservoir, some bearings, and other bits. And back then there was no eBay guaranteed fit program, so finding parts for such a rare 20-year-old car was not easy. Luckily, I sold it to someone who not only cared for it, but took the time to fix it up, and every once in a while I do get to still see it, and I still regret ever getting rid of it. I am constantly online looking for a new SVX because now I have a system that I can find parts for it, but I haven't come across one that's both in the right condition and the right price range. With over 122 million parts, you can make sure your number one ride or die stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, welcome back. This week we have a special guest returning. We have Mike from Hyundai again. Welcome back.
Thank you much for having me. Good to be back.
So last time we had you on, we talked Santa Fe. This time we're switching gears and going to talk about cars. So earlier in this podcast, Kyle and I briefly got into the reviews we had on the Elantra and Sonata. So we just have a couple questions that we thought, who better to ask?
Okay,
So,
absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I drove the Sonata and I noticed a lot of small details that people might have missed or people might miss or not know about. Like it had a gas strut to hold up the hood and there's soft touch on the top of the rear doors. A lot of your competitors are abandoning sedans or not really investing in them, whereas Hyundai seems to be like doubling down. Do you see a strong future still in sedans?
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the demand path, and so SUVs being obviously very popular over the last 5-10 years. It's really accelerated, but there are still consumers out there that like sedans, like passenger cars, whether it be due to the efficiency. We always talked about higher seating position, but some people do prefer a lower seating position. And then from a demand perspective, if you look at the forecast, if you look at both compact and mid-size segments for passenger cars, I mean, it's still over 1.5 million units a year on average. So like for the next 3 years or so, you're looking at like a total of 5 million units between those two segments. And if some manufacturers elect to, not participate in those segments, that's still, opportunity for Hyundai and for our products. And yeah, we do put a lot behind our refreshes and even all new models. So I definitely see, potential and some growth out there for sedans and opportunities for us moving forward.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that some prefer sedans because Colin and I were talking about this earlier. I hadn't driven a so-called mid-size sedan. I mean, they're not that small anymore in quite some time. And as soon as I got in Sonata, I forgot like how nice they are. They just feel more solid and you just feel more connected and smooth. Whereas we drive so many SUVs, you kind of forget what it's like to drive just like a regular car. It's like SUV or sports car, it seems most of the time.
Yeah, and just like, even dynamically, because you're just lower to the ground, it just dynamics and efficiency are the keys for sedans and people who appreciate that. We definitely want to still provide an option for them in the marketplace. But yeah, I definitely think some people do definitely tend towards the sedan size and resist the migration to SUVs like everybody else seems to have done.
Yeah. So I drove an SEL equivalent. Mm-hmm. And that has the all-wheel drive. So just wondering sort of what factors were involved in putting all-wheel drive on with this refresh, and why it isn't available on, say, the N line or the hybrid?
Well, we just talked about people, sometimes prefer sedans, but also to counter 75, 80%, SUV sales. Sometimes it makes sense to offer a powertrain that is also available on the SUV side. So if they are in the colder weather states, the snowbelt states, and you still do want that sedan, having the all-wheel drive option, can counter any SUV, I think, influence. And as far as to which vehicle to add it to, or which powertrain, this is basically a mid-cycle, facelift. So it's a very extensive one. Whole front clip, hood, fenders, rear bumper, rear deck lid. So it's a dramatic change. But to even change powertrains and add all-wheel drive availability, I think is pretty remarkable at kind of mid-life cycle. But we wanted to also add it to the kind of, as of right now, the core engine powertrain, which is the 2.5 liter gas engine. And also from an engineering standpoint, that was I guess the path of least resistance to add it quickly at this mid-life cycle timing. Hybrid focuses on efficiency, and I guess you want front-wheel drive, the lowest weight possible. That makes the most sense for the hybrid side. I totally get the performance side with the N line and the 2.5 liter turbo, but from an engineering standpoint, that's a lot more time, effort to add all-wheel drive to that. So to get all-wheel drive into the Sonata family made the most sense in the core lineup. To do it to the 2.5 with the 8-speed automatic, the normally aspirated version, to get it out there into the marketplace.
Yeah, I understand. You have to beef up quite a few components in the N line, but if there's ever discussion, I vote for it.
I've had those discussions here internally as well, and I understand the need for it. But at least for right now, only on the non-turbo version.
So you brought up what was my final question on the Sonata, the styling. I really think it's awesome that Hyundai never shies away from changing styling and going dramatic with the styling. Sonata is probably one of the best cases. I mean, every time it's new or refresh is very different. I really like the new look that's on this refresh. What's sort of the way that the team approaches these designs? Like, is it they just get a new idea they want to run with? Is it market research?
They look at everything. They do market research, consumer trends, and there are certain design elements, we're looking to incorporate as well. When we were working on Sonata and Elantra refreshes, a design element, the seamless horizon lamp, which you might be familiar. The new Kona has it as well. It's that bar that goes across the front. So that they want it to be integrated into the styling. And if the outgoing version, it was more of a vertical, I think. The headlight graphics kind of went up the hood. Now we're talking about, it's like kind of north-south versus east-west. So that, drives kind of a whole fundamental change on the front. And, we're not afraid to make those, fundamental changes. I mean, we talked about last time the Santa Fe. That's a huge departure from the outgoing model. So, the designers are given, latitude to study what's popular, what the trends are. We're not dealing with some of the truly iconic designs, I guess I should say, that you really have to be careful on incremental changes and just tweak little things moving forward. We have the opportunity, even though this is like the 8th generation, you still can make some pretty bold changes. And we want to, also because it still is a very competitive marketplace. And I remember we've always talked about, for the most part, design is free. And you can design that into the car and build demand and appeal into the car from the get-go. And if it requires, a lot of investment, like I said, new hood, fenders, a lot of metal parts changed for this vehicle. And that's a lot of work that's involved but it gives it a whole new look and feel, not only outside, but on the inside as well. You'll notice the whole kind of architecture and layout of the dash was changed to get the latest generation of our multimedia systems in there. So you've got fundamental changes both inside and out to keep the product fresh and moving forward.
Yeah, I really like the one element of the tail light. That's my favorite part. I just like the way those sort of rectangles kind of come in on either side. I've always got a thing for looking at lights on cars.
Yeah, the light signature is huge, both front and rear. It's what people see on the road. It definitely draws your attention. So it's something, the light signature is something we definitely pay a lot of attention to, put a lot of focus on.
All right, well, I'll hand it over to Kyle now.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly add, talking about the Sonata, I just want to say, I feel like one of the earliest light signatures that I remember is the first hybrid with the atom-like tail light.
Oh, yes.
It was such a three-dimensional quality. It was so cool, and like it's such an easy one to spot on the road.
It's like a little Easter egg, and you notice it once you get close to the vehicle. From far away, maybe not, but it's kind of those surprising delights that designers definitely like to put into the vehicle to just make it that much more unique and special.
Mm-hmm. So cool. Well, Mike, thanks for being with us. I'm going to ask you just a couple questions about the Elantra since I drove it.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed recently, being in it, is just how low the cowl and the nose is versus a lot of other cars in the class. So I just want to know, from your perspective and the team's perspective, how important is that, do you think, for folks who are still on the car side of the market?
Well, I think it definitely gives good visibility, both front and to the corners, and that's something we definitely consider when they're designing the vehicles. Not to talk Santa Fe as well, but even Santa Fe with its more upright styling, a lot of the feedback I got from people who had driven it was that they were amazed at how the visibility is. You can still see the corners, you can still see everything. Same is true for Elantra. You are sitting lower to the ground, and visibility definitely plays a key role in all that. Obviously, from a safety perspective, everything still is analyzed and contributes to the safety of the vehicle, it being a top safety pick plus. But I think it definitely factors in. They feel more comfortable behind the wheel because everything's so easily at touch and visible right in front of the driver and even the passenger as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that I noticed. Like it's a pretty big car now, the Elantra, but yeah, it's very easy to see out of, and even with that coupe-like profile, right? Like I still get pretty great visibility out the back.
And there's always technology too to help that too. I mean, there is good visibility, but we have standard blind spot warning on all Elantras and Sonatas. So just that little bit of extra, peace of mind to give you that awareness of what's going on around you. But it all kind of factors into that whole, ownership and driving experience that you get from our vehicles.
And one of the few cars in the class to offer a 360 camera.
Yes, that's correct.
So Elantra N, I think I speak for both Mike and I, that Elantra N is probably one of our favorite sedans. But could you maybe talk to some of the detail changes that came as part of the facelift for that model this year?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite too. I absolutely adore that car, and every time I get a chance to drive it, whether it be on street or on track, I mean, I'm still to this day amazed at what that car is capable of at that price point. So some of the updates for 24, along with the regular Elantra lineup, the front and rear styling were changed. The front actually provides more cooling to the brakes, so there is actually engineering, behind just the not just aesthetically, but also from an engineering perspective as well. But I think it's all under the surface, which you can't see. It's difficult to convey sometimes, but we try to do the best as possible. But we just wanted to make it, that much incrementally better. So there was a lot of changes, whether it be the front engine mount, the lower mount between the engine and the transmission and the body itself. The durometer of the bushing itself was increased, so you get a more positive shift feel, and it's more effective to transmit the power to the ground. Also, a lot of in the rear suspension was adjusted. Trailing arm bushings were changed. There was also a change to the insulator for the rear dampener, and you would think that's just the rear, but what happens at the rear of the vehicle directly affects what happens in the front, and primarily steering. Your initial turn in, how the car reacts to change, how the rear end communicates with the front of the car as one. So we wanted to make it just that much more responsive. Also at the same time, we do have these hardware changes, so that makes us or allows us to go in and retune the software for the dampeners, because it does have the electronically controlled suspension. So that was also upgraded, retuned for the new changes. And then also one of the bigger changes is both visual and mechanical is the wheels. I think the wheels, the new 19-inch forged alloy wheels, where they were cast alloy before. The forged alloy wheels are about 8 pounds per corner lighter, so about 33 pounds in total. And, while 33 pounds is a lot to pull out of a car, this is unsprung weight or unsprung mass. So that has even more direct benefit. And to a performance car like Elantra N, you really feel that in acceleration, braking, turning. It's like a 360, improvement and impact to the vehicle, just having the lower wheel weight. And I think just from a visual perspective and the dark finish and everything, it just really matches the Elantra N. Suits it perfectly. So to recap, basically, it's a lot of things you can't see, but I think from a driving perspective, you definitely notice a difference. And an already fantastic car just gets, a little bit even better. Ride quality, while it still was daily driver friendly, I think it's even more so like in normal mode. It just continues to be a really well-rounded, almost Jekyll and Hyde type of car, whether it be, on the track or in your daily commute. It's always there to deliver.
Well, darn, now I'm even more excited to hopefully drive it this summer. I mean, ideally, it'd be really fascinating to get a pre-facelift back to back with it, because I think like this is something that we've seen with some of the most iconic modern sports cars, is these incremental changes where, like you said, like it's not so much what you can see, it's what you can't. Right. And in the best way possible, the Elantra N is probably one of the least front drive cars I've driven, and so I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's got a little lift throttle oversteer. It's a true driver's friend, and we still have available both the DCT, which is fantastic, but also obviously the 3-pedal manual as well. Very tough decision even for me personally between those two transmissions, but we know the importance to for a sporty car to have those kind of options. So happy to say you can still get a manual or a DCT, whatever suits your feeling.
Yeah, and it's one of the few in that segment to offer both. Talking about DCTs, you actually kind of just led me to the next question. So one of the things that we've seen with a lot of the other vehicles in the whole family with the 1.6 turbo is a move to the 8-speed automatic. So I was just we were kind of curious, why does the N-Line stick with a DCT for this facelift?
So it's combined with the 1.6 turbo. Given N-Line's positioning is a little bit more sportier in the lineup, not quite all the way to the N level, but definitely more so than the regular or standard car with the 2-liter and the IVT or CVT transmission. We felt the DCT still matched kind of the character of the N-Line, with that turbocharged engine. The 1.6 turbo is available in our other products, but sometimes it's a lower output. We consider this one the high output version, the 201 horsepower version, where it's a little bit lower in others, and that maybe works well with the 8AT. But for the higher output and for its N-Line positioning, we wanted to maintain that DCT, for those fast, shift responses, and just kind of give it that sporty feel. I think is very suitable for the N-Line and where it's positioned in the lineup, and because we still have the more conventional IVT available on the standard cars as well.
It's a shame that the manual is no longer a choice.
I remember that car, but yes, it's tough decisions, and when we did no longer offer the manual, the N was then available, because when we first launched Elantra, the N came a year later after launch. So I thought it was really important to launch the N line to establish it with both transmissions, the DCT and the manual. But then, now we have the option of the Elantra with the manual, the Elantra N. So I think that was a fair swap to make at the time.
Yeah. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to sit down and talk with us and chat with us about cars. Because like Mike said, it's nice to talk about actual cars for a change. I think
it's like what we all enjoy doing. I enjoy doing it every day. So pleasure to be here, and thanks to be back. Good to be back.
All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Well, I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, it's that time of week again. We have Colin Wood joining us to talk about all of the latest F1 news and rumors. What do you got for us this week?
Hey, Mike. There's some juicy stuff, though. Maybe the most interesting is when, silly season's one thing, but when Formula One starts to get political, that may be the most juicy. So the interesting thing that happened this week is that Andretti, which has been trying very hard to get into Formula One and has been rejected, as we all know, they actually got 12 members of Congress to sign a letter that was sent to Liberty Media. And basically the letter, it says a bunch of stuff. They're basically asking for an explanation of how it is that they basically didn't get in. Why is it? And is there a reason for that? And I think it's interesting that this comes just ahead of the Miami Grand Prix, right before the first U.S. race of the season.
So you mean, is there a reason besides the other teams just didn't want to share money? Is that what they're trying to find out?
Well, maybe. And this is where it gets interesting. So I pulled up the letter here, and at the very end, it says, we request your response by May 3rd, which is actually the date that we're recording this, as we continue to exercise oversight on this matter and with the appropriate federal regulators to ensure that any potential violations of U.S. anti-competition law are expeditiously investigated and pursued. So
this is awesome. It's like Andretti's using a passive aggressive, basically, hey, you want to keep racing in the US, let us in. I mean, it's not anywhere near that yet, but it's sort of giving the hint of, you got 3 races here and they are always looking to do more, and they're very successful in terms of what sort of money they're bringing in. And yeah, like this whole thing is just ridiculous. Like you have a guy and a manufacturer who want to get into the series so bad, and yet you have teams that can't even find sponsors and don't have names right now. Like, yeah, it's such a, I mean, F1's always been like that. It's just such a weirdly run organization of the insider club and whatnot. But
it really is. It's the like ultimate old boys club, kind of run by Ferrari, which is the whole Ferrari empire lives on that, right? They live on that ideal of like, we are the cool people and you have to, do whatever we say. It's like a frat, right? Like, yeah, I'm always shocked by it.
And I still can't believe the response of, we would be afraid you wouldn't be competitive enough. It's like, I would be shocked if Andretti couldn't beat Haas, Racing Bulls, Alpine. Like, it's going to be with those guys at the worst. Like, you can't. So anyway,
agreed. And it wasn't all that long ago that there was Caterham and a bunch of terrible teams that were so far off the pace. And even back then there was I'm trying to remember, Super Aguri Honda, right? They were only there because Honda was involved, and they didn't even make it through like a whole season, I don't think, or they left halfway through a season. I remember that. So, and
I just like the thoughts of a 22 car grid. I just think it sounds nice. But anyway,
I like that. I like a 24 car grid, to be frank. Like, I think more than that's probably too much, but sometimes it looks pretty sparse out there, and it's like when you watch like endurance car racing, and you see, at Le Mans, and there's like 80 cars all out there at once, and you're like, wow, it just looks impressive, right? So,
I mean, if Andretti really wants to put the pressure on, go to the Drive to Survive producers and get onto that show somehow.
There we go.
Public behind you, right? Like, that show's already putting pressure that people want the point system to extend deeper into the places, so there's like more reason for people to be fighting over 13th place or whatnot. So
yeah. That point system debate is interesting, because I part of me really likes it. And then it's funny, I saw a tweet by Martin Brundle basically saying like, no, our Formula One World Championship points should be like very hard to earn and only the very best should get them, and blah, blah, blah. But it does kind of help distinguish those lower places and potentially even increase the competition and maybe the spectacle for those of us watching of like, getting 12th, you do get a point. So battling over 12th versus 13th, you'd really push if you're 13th to get to 12th. You'd really, really push, versus right now, like there's no sense in trying to send one up the inside because you wreck your car to get to 12th. You still don't get any points right now, and why do it? So just, pack it in, keep your pace slow, and wait till the next race. So
yeah, like all things equal with strategy and not breaking down. I mean, the 8 top spots are basically going to be taken by 4 teams at this time. So the other teams are fighting over 2 spots. And I mean, back in the day, only 6 places got points. And we seem to be really happy with 10. So anyway, it's just one of those, people hate change. Yeah, especially the older they get. As I'm getting older, I know I get where they're coming from. This is the way it was and whatnot. But you see it in all sports: baseball, hockey, football. Like,
yeah, there's always the good old days, right? And there's some truth to it, but you got to change. I got
anything else for us?
One other interesting piece I saw actually is that Gunter Steiner, former head of Haas, is apparently suing the team for a bunch of reasons. Apparently, things like actually using his likeness on stuff that they probably have rights to do that, and I think involving even some like unpaid wages, he's claiming. So we'll see if there's much going on there, but I'm sure he could use a few bucks, and I bet there's no love lost in that relationship, right? So
Yeah, I know. Like once when it first happened, he was saying he didn't like the timing of it. And I mean, not like the team's great now, but they're a little more competitive. So I think he maybe feels he helped develop this car with the team, but he wasn't an engineer. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think he'll be okay on money. He can be the Danica Patrick of Drive to Survive for the next season, and he can, do public talks and
Yeah, they'll pay him. He'll be okay. Or he'll go to like race for somewhere, like run another race team somewhere else. I'm sure there's, I guess
go
probably
back to NASCAR. I think they'd love him back there. I mean, he has some roots there, right?
He does. Well, the funny thing is, I remember watching Drive to Survive. I was always mystified because the first early seasons, they always showed him he's in Austria or he's in, Italy here and there. And then you find out he lives in Virginia and you're like, oh, he's a bit more of a good old boy than the fancy accent lets on, right? So,
well, I think he headed up the Red Bull NASCAR team when they were in the series, right? So like even has history with that, which is even more intriguing.
Interesting.
I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I thought that's the team he was with.
Yeah. Well, we'll look it up and fact check for the next time.
Yeah, I'll do it right now while we're talking.
Just there you go. Sure there you go. You check it, and the only other piece I had that I thought was it came true was Adrian Newey officially announced he left Red Bull, right? So that all came to fruition as we kind of were talking. It took slightly longer than I thought, maybe a couple more days, but I guess they had to work some deal. Apparently, Fred Vasseur of Ferrari has already been to see him. So I think the anticipation all around is that he'll wind up at Ferrari. And I always think of it two ways. Like one means like, oh man, if they got Hamilton, whatever, they're going to be like the dominant team of all time and there'll be no going back. But, if there's a team that could screw up everything Adrian Newey could do, it's Ferrari, right? So yeah. We'll see.
I'd still be cool if he was jumping to Williams or something, like just someone you don't expect, and then all of a sudden with the 26 rules, they're a front runner. Yeah. So yeah, I looked it up. He when he left DTM, he was kind of got hooked up with Red Bull again, and then Red Bull used him to establish their NASCAR team.
Interesting.
He wasn't there long because then they pulled it. Like Red Bull wasn't in NASCAR long either.
I know, right?
It's the one motorsport they couldn't get into. Well, because it is such a different world. Not like, I'm not saying this in a bad way. Like the teams that are there have spent decades refining the aero and the techniques for the oval racing. Like you can't just pop in and be like, hey, I'm going to be here. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny though that they never really got it. Maybe they just weren't interested, right? I think there's a lot of that of NASCAR is just a different beast, right? It really is. And like Toyota, their credit, they took them a long time, but they said they were going to do it and they weren't kidding, right? Versus we heard rumors of Hondas and Nissans and other brands doing it, but it's like Toyota actually did NASCAR and did it right. So
yeah, and they're still doing it. I mean, the teams aren't what they used to be. There's not as many driving them, but they're still doing well. So
yeah.
Anyway, so back to F1 race this weekend. We won't know what happens until this is already posted, but hopefully the pavement stays on the ground. I know that it wasn't a concern last year. How many fake water jokes will we get this year?
A few. Yeah, the race is like it was very funny that for the first, I remember the first Miami GP, they basically came out and they designed this track sort of to intentionally have like really tight pinch zones to sort of force accidents almost, right? Like they were sort of admitted this. They wanted to make it really tricky. But then all the drivers came out and kind of tiptoed around it, and they're the best drivers in the world. So it didn't produce any great spectacles that I recall. So we'll see if it does. It's a sprint race, so there's more chance for chaos there, I guess, right? So, but
more races, more points.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I try not to. Sometimes races are great, and you never expect them to be, right? I think last week's race or the week before, the China race was probably the best race of the season. So hopefully we have some more. Competition and maybe a little chaos in there too. So
yeah, like I said, first place, who cares? But it's the 2nd through 10th that if that's interesting, it's an interesting race. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll have you back on next week, and Kyle will come back and we're going to talk about what's ahead.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, we got Kyle back, and before we go, we'll give you a little preview of what's ahead. So this week, I have been driving nothing. I've been working on Project Genesis Coupe. What about you, Kyle?
I have been driving the Mini 1-6, the last Mini manual. It's my first experience with a JCW 3-door. Yeah, and I won't spoil it. I'll talk about it later in a future episode when we put out the review. But so far, mostly positive. Yeah, and then next week we swap in. You were just saying how much you enjoy driving midsize sedans, so we're both going to do that next week.
Yeah, it's Altima, all-wheel drive Altima versus hybrid Accord. And on paper, you might be like, that's weird. But the goal is these are two different approaches to the segment that sort of price and feature-wise aren't too far off. And it's sort of what works for you and which one's maybe the best overall choice. So yeah, I look forward to that. I haven't driven the Altima in a long time. And I haven't driven the hybrid Accord, I don't think. I think I've only driven the 4-cylinder. So yeah, I look forward to it.
I don't think I've even driven this generation of Altima. So yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Good times. And then of course I'm back on the travel bandwagon next week as well. We are going to experience the new facelifted Genesis GV80. Whoops. The SUV, but both it and the new coupe version. So I will be reporting back. I don't think I'll be able to talk much about it on our next episode, but the one after, people will probably be able to find out a lot more. So if you're interested, you'll want to tune in.
Yeah, I'm very jealous of that coupe. I can't wait to try it myself. I hope to drive it later this year when they start showing up in the fleet and the dealers.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, before we go, Mini, if you want to go full Aston Martin and not really make this the last manual Mini, we won't be upset. So just, little heads up there. But this has been the AutoGuide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors, and we will talk to you next week.
See you later.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.